I never thought I'd be the type of mother who'd feel like a stranger in her own son's home. But here we are. Daniel, my only child, the boy I poured every ounce of my heart and soul into raising, grew up, got married, and somewhere along the way, I became less of a person in his eyes and more of a utility. A placeholder. Something useful only when convenient. When Daniel first introduced me to Lily, his college sweetheart, I felt nothing but joy. She was poised, graceful, and polite. Everything a mother could hope for in a daughter-in-law. She hugged me warmly, asked about my hobbies, and even baked me cookies once. I thought, God has blessed me with a daughter I never had. But masks don't stay on forever. It started small, innocent, almost invisible. The kind of things you ignore because you want to believe the best in people. A plate left in the sink. A grocery list left accidentally on the counter. Hey, can you just fold that laundry real quick? Tossed over her shoulder as if I were part of the hired help. And Daniel, my son, my own flesh and blood, just went along with it. Sometimes I think he didn't even notice. Other times, I wonder if he simply didn't care. He would smile and say things like, "Come on, Mom, you like helping out, don't you?" As if I should be grateful to still be included in their lives at all. Grateful. That word has burned itself into my chest like a brand. As though my worth had shrunk to whatever scraps of usefulness they could squeeze out of me. But I swallowed it. For years, I swallowed it. Because that's what mothers do, we endure. We tell ourselves this is just a phase. We make excuses they're young. Marriage is stressful. They'll come around. Except they didn't. Every time I visited their home in Denver, I felt less like a guest and more like staff. I'd walk through the door and be greeted not with hugs or warmth, but with chore lists disguised as casual requests. The way Lily said, "Oh, you don't mind helping, do you?" made my skin crawl, because it wasn't really a question. It was an assignment. And Daniel, well, Daniel would just nod along, looking at me with that practiced smile, the one that said, "Play along, Mom. Don't make this awkward." It wasn't just about washing dishes or running errands. It was about the way they looked at me. Like I was outdated furniture cluttering their perfect little home. Something to keep around for appearances, but never respected. Still, I bit my tongue. For the sake of peace. For the sake of family. Until 2 days before Christmas. That was when everything changed. They waltzed into the living room. Smug little grins plastered on their faces. I was sitting on the couch, knitting a scarf for my neighbor's granddaughter, when Daniel announced it like he was doing me a favor. "So, our friends are spending Christmas here," he said casually. "Just a small group, maybe 25 people." 25. I froze mid-stitch. 25 people, 2 days before Christmas. No notice. No preparation. No conversation. Just an expectation. Mom will handle it. Mom will cook. Mom will clean. Mom will serve. Mom will smile and act like she's honored to be included. Lily leaned in, her voice dripping with that syrupy tone she used when she wanted to sugarcoat her manipulation. "It'll be fun, won't it? You always make the best food, and honestly, I don't know what we'd do without you." I nodded slowly, keeping my face blank, but inside something cracked. It wasn't anger, not the sharp, explosive kind. It was deeper than that. It was the hollow, aching realization that I had let myself be diminished to this point. They didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as staff. And I decided, right then and there, that this Christmas would be different. Because I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. What they didn't know, what they couldn't even begin to imagine, was that I had plans of my own. Plans that would flip their perfect little holiday upside down. But before I tell you exactly what I did, let me pause here for a moment. I want you, the one listening to my story right now, to know something. Stories like this? They take hours and hours to craft. Hours of remembering painful details, of reliving moments I once tried to bury, of carefully choosing words to make sure the picture is painted vividly enough for you to step right into my shoes. So, if you're finding yourself hooked already, if you're shaking your head thinking, "No way, this can't be real," then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. It's the least you can do for the work I've put into this. And honestly, it means the world. Because trust me, the best part of this story hasn't even begun. If you were in my shoes, if your own child and their spouse treated you like a maid, would you keep quiet for the sake of family peace? Or would you stand up and take your dignity back? Tell me in the comments, because I really want to know. I sat there on the couch, my knitting needles frozen midair, staring at Daniel and Lily as if they had just announced the earth was flat. 25 guests, 2 days before Christmas, and not a single mention of how it would all get done. I looked at my son, my baby boy, the one I used to hold through fevers and nightmares, and I searched for some flicker of hesitation on his face, some sign that maybe, just maybe, he realized what he was asking of me. But all I saw was smug certainty, like a man who believed the sun rose because he told it to. Lily perched herself on the arm of his chair, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. She tilted her head, giving me that practiced little smile of hers, the one that was supposed to look sweet but felt more like a dagger wrapped in lace. "You don't mind helping, do you?" she said in her sing-song voice. That phrase again. Always the same words, always with the same false softness. It wasn't a request. It was a command dressed up as kindness. Inside me, something shifted. Not snapped, not yet, but shifted. Like a door creaking open in a house that's been sealed for years. I forced my lips into a smile, though it felt like pulling barbed wire across my face. "Of course," I murmured. My voice came out so calm it almost startled me. Because here's the thing, I wasn't going to fight them. Not then. Not in that moment. They thought I was still the same woman who would scrub their dishes and cook their meals while they laughed with their friends in the other room. They thought I was still the mother who would swallow every slight just to feel included. But no, that night, when I returned to the small guest room they let me stay in during visits, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my suitcase. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I opened the zipper, pulled out my phone, and started making calls. The first was to the airport. By midnight, I had a ticket booked to Dallas, Texas, a one-way flight. The second call was harder. It wasn't to a stranger on a customer service line. It was to someone who had become my lifeline over the past 2 years. Someone Daniel and Lily didn't even know existed. When he answered, his deep, steady voice washed over me like balm. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered, glancing at the closed door, half afraid Daniel or Lily might overhear. "I've had enough." There was silence for a beat, then a low chuckle. "Then let them have their Christmas surprise." That was the moment I knew without a shadow of doubt, that I wasn't coming back as the same woman. The next morning, I went through the motions. I brewed coffee, folded a basket of laundry Lily had conveniently left in the hallway, and even started peeling potatoes, as if I were already prepping for the feast they assumed I'd make. They had no idea. No idea that the woman humming softly over the cutting board had a plane ticket tucked into her purse. No idea that the mother they thought they had cornered was about to vanish, leaving them face to face with the empty kitchen they'd taken for granted. At around noon, Lily breezed into the kitchen, dressed in her athleisure outfit, her face aglow as though she were the queen of the castle. "Oh good, you started. I was worried we'd never get everything done in time." I bit back a laugh. She said we, but there was no we. There had never been a we. There was just me. I smiled and kept peeling. "Don't worry. Everything will be handled." And in a way it would be. Just not by me. That evening, I told them I needed to run a quick errand. "A few last-minute gifts," I said. "I'll be back later tonight." They barely looked up from the couch where they were scrolling through their phones, glasses of wine in hand. "Sure, Mom," Daniel mumbled. I walked out the door, my heart pounding against my ribs, my suitcase rolling quietly behind me. Each step felt both terrifying and exhilarating. At the airport, I watched the holiday chaos swirl around me. Families lugging presents, children squealing, couples arguing about delayed flights. And for the first time in years, I felt invisible in the best way possible. No one expected me to serve. No one expected me to clean. I was just another traveler on her way somewhere new. As the plane lifted off the runway, I stared out the window at the lights of Denver fading beneath the clouds. A lump rose in my throat, not from sadness, but from something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. When I landed in Dallas, he was there waiting. The man who had turned my world upside down in the best possible way. The man Daniel and Lily would soon regret ever underestimating me over. He pulled me into his arms, strong and steady, and kissed my forehead. "You did it," he said. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling with both fear and relief. "Now let's see how they handle Christmas without their maid." What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was just how poetic the universe was about to get. Because while Daniel and Lily were busy panicking over their empty kitchen, scrambling to salvage their grand holiday plans, they were about to be blindsided by a revelation that would shatter their smug little world completely. And I couldn't wait to see the look on their faces. The hum of the plane still echoed in my ears even after I had landed in Dallas. Airports are strange places, so full of noise and chaos. Yet somehow, they can feel like the quietest places in the world. Walking through the terminal that night, suitcase in hand, I realized I had just made the boldest decision of my life. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to what Daniel and Lily wanted. I wasn't bending to their needs, their schedules, their whims. No, I was acting on my own terms. And let me tell you, the freedom of it was intoxicating. But here's the truth I haven't told you yet. My trip to Texas wasn't just an escape. It wasn't just about running away from Christmas chaos and leaving them to drown in their own entitlement. It was about running towards something. Someone. 2 years earlier, after my husband passed away, I was a wreck. Losing him felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. We had been married for over 30 years, and suddenly I was adrift. Daniel visited at first, but soon Lily found reasons why he was too busy. Before long, I was spending most nights in a quiet house, talking to a man who wasn't there anymore. That's when I met him. It started innocently enough, through a church friend in Dallas who invited me to a charity gala. I almost didn't go. Grief makes you retreat from the world. But something inside me whispered that I needed to breathe different air, even if just for one evening. He was there, tall, commanding, the kind of presence that made people turn their heads when he entered a room. But he wasn't arrogant. No, he was kind, gentle. He noticed I was nervous, standing off to the side, clutching my glass of sparkling water, and instead of brushing past me like everyone else, he came over. He asked my name. He asked about my late husband. And he listened, really listened. That night turned into a coffee the next morning, then a phone call, then another. Before I knew it, we were speaking every week, then every day. And slowly, the grief that had been suffocating me began to loosen its grip. He was patient with me, never pushing, never rushing. He understood what it was like to carry loss, because he'd been there too. And when he finally told me who he was, CEO of one of the largest companies in Dallas, I nearly choked on my tea. Not because of the title, not because of the money, but because he never flaunted it. To me, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man who made me laugh when I thought I'd never laugh again. A man who reminded me that I was still alive. And a year later, we quietly got married. Yes, married. Daniel and Lily had no idea. I hadn't told them not because I was ashamed, but because, well, they never asked. They never cared enough to wonder about my life outside their walls. To them, I was an appliance, always there, always ready, never needing anything in return. But now, that secret was going to become the key to my freedom. Because while they were sitting in Denver smugly planning their grand Christmas dinner, expecting me to slave away for their guests, I was walking hand in hand with my husband through the glittering streets of Dallas, where holiday lights twinkled and music spilled from every corner. "You know," he said as we passed a shop window displaying gingerbread houses, "you don't have to keep this quiet forever." I squeezed his hand. "I know, but when I do tell them, I want it to count." And oh, it was going to count. That night, lying in a warm bed that wasn't in a cramped guest room, but in a home that was truly mine, I thought back to every little slight. Every dish left for me. Every chore disguised as kindness. Every time Daniel smiled at me, like I should be grateful for scraps of affection. And I realized something that hurt and healed me all at once. I had let it happen. I had handed them my dignity piece by piece, until I had nothing left but a role I never auditioned for or made. But not anymore. The woman who had boarded that plane was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who knew exactly what she deserved. And for the first time, I couldn't wait to go back. Not to serve them, not to please them, but to watch their faces when the truth finally hit. Because the woman they thought they could control was about to show them exactly who she had become. While Daniel and Lily lounged on their couch in Denver, sipping wine and bragging to their friends about their upcoming Christmas extravaganza, I was 3 states away, sipping hot cocoa with my husband in Dallas. It was delicious. Not the cocoa, the silence, the freedom, the knowledge that, for once, they were the ones scrambling, not me. Because here's the thing, when you spend years being treated like a servant, people forget you're capable of outsmarting them. They start to think you're predictable, easy, pliable. They underestimate you. And nothing is sweeter than the moment you flip the script. The morning after I landed, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Daniel, hey mom, just checking. Did you start the ham yet? I stared at the screen, a smile tugging at my lips. The ham. He meant the ham. The one I always slow cooked for hours, glazed with brown sugar and cloves, the centerpiece of every holiday meal. I set the phone down on the counter and didn't reply. An hour later, another buzz. Daniel, mom, need you to confirm. Guests are expecting the ham. This time I laughed out loud. Guests are expecting the ham. Not we're making the ham. Or, do you need help with the ham? Just the demand, as usual. I let the phone sit. By evening, I had 3 missed calls from him and 1 from Lily. No voicemail, of course. Just the silent pressure of their expectations filling up my notification bar. Meanwhile, I was at the Dallas Arboretum, walking hand in hand with my husband under a canopy of Christmas lights that glittered like stars. Children ran past with candy canes, couples posed for photos, and I felt like I was finally part of the world again. The irony was almost too rich. While they were panicking over pork, I was reclaiming my joy. But I wasn't content to just vanish and let them figure it out. No. Revenge, to me, wasn't about cruelty, it was about justice. About balance. About making sure they felt, if only for a little while, what it was like to be taken for granted. So I started small. The grocery order they had left on the counter, I canceled it. A quick phone call to the store, pretending to be Lily Reynolds, and poof, order gone. The caterer Lily had secretly booked for desserts, because heaven forbid she bake a pie herself. I called them too, explaining that plans had changed. A polite cancellation. By the time Christmas Eve rolled around, every backup plan they might have leaned on had quietly crumbled. And I sat back, watching it all from the comfort of my Texas living room, sipping mulled wine as my husband chuckled beside me. You're enjoying this a little too much, he teased, his eyes twinkling. Maybe, I admitted. But it's not just about me. It's about making sure they learn. Because here's the truth. Daniel and Lily weren't bad people at their core. They were entitled, selfish, blind to the harm they caused, but not evil. And part of me still believed they could change. But not if I kept enabling them. They needed to fall flat on their perfect little faces. On Christmas Eve afternoon, the real panic began. My phone buzzed nonstop. Lily, where are you? Daniel, Mom, this isn't funny. Guests are coming tomorrow. We need you. Lily, did you even get the groceries? The kitchen is empty. I pictured them standing in that spotless kitchen, opening empty cupboards, realizing too late that the woman they thought they could control had finally slipped through their fingers. And oh, it was glorious. By midnight, I had 12 missed calls and 7 texts. Still, I didn't answer. Instead, I laid my head on my husband's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, and smiled. Tomorrow, I whispered. Tomorrow they'll finally understand. Because little did they know, their humiliation wasn't going to stop with an empty kitchen. The real surprise was still waiting. Christmas morning has a certain magic to it. At least, it used to. When Daniel was little, he'd bolt out of bed in his pajamas, his hair sticking up like a wild crown, and he'd shake me awake, whisper shouting, Mom. Santa came. But this Christmas morning was different. Instead of laughter and wrapping paper, there was tension so thick in Denver you could slice it with a carving knife. I wasn't there, of course. I was in Dallas, curled up on a soft couch with my husband, sipping coffee laced with cinnamon. The tree lights glowed softly, and holiday music drifted from the speakers. But even from hundreds of miles away, I could almost hear the panic echoing from my son's house, because their kitchen was empty. No ham in the oven, no pies cooling on the counter, no vegetables chopped, no cookies baked, no dishes washed and waiting. Nothing. The frantic text began at 7 a.m. Daniel, Mom, this isn't funny. Guests are coming at noon. Where are you? 5 minutes later. Lily, answer your phone. The turkey is still frozen solid. What were you thinking? Another 30 minutes passed, and then, Daniel, if you don't pick up, I swear. I stopped reading after that. Instead, I smiled into my mug, savoring the sweet warmth on my tongue. My husband reached over, took the phone from my hand, and set it on the table. They'll figure it out, he said calmly. They'll have to, I replied. Meanwhile, in Denver, I imagine the scene went something like this. Guests arriving one by one, dressed in their holiday best, smiling and expecting the grand feast Lily had promised. Wine bottles in hand, trays of appetizers, cheerful greetings. And then the realization. The kitchen barren. The fridge half empty. A frozen turkey sitting uselessly on the counter. The polite smiles starting to crack. The awkward whispers beginning to spread. By noon, my phone was blowing up again. Lily, they're here. Everyone's here. What am I supposed to do? Daniel, you've embarrassed us. Do you understand that? Embarrassed US. That one made me laugh. Embarrassed them. As though I had signed up to be their unpaid caterer. I pictured Lily's perfectly painted smile, faltering as her guests began to ask questions. I pictured Daniel pacing, tugging at his shirt collar, muttering excuses about a miscommunication. And I pictured the moment when they realized the one person they had counted on to make them look good wasn't coming to save them. Not this time. Do you think I should text them? I asked my husband playfully, curling up beside him on the couch. He raised an eyebrow. And ruin the suspense? He was right. Let them stew. Let them scramble. By early evening, the messages had slowed. No doubt the guests had either left early, disappointed, or ordered takeout to salvage the night. The humiliation must have been unbearable for Lily, queen of appearances, watching her carefully crafted image collapse in front of 25 of their so-called friends. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Because while the empty kitchen had been their first taste of failure without me, the real exposure was still coming. They thought the embarrassment ended with a ruined Christmas party. But soon, they'd learn the truth. They'd learn about the man they didn't know I'd married. They'd learn about the life I'd built quietly, while they were too busy seeing me as a servant. And they'd learn that the CEO they were so desperate to impress already had everything he needed, sitting right beside him. Me. The day after Christmas always carries a strange quiet. Streets that have been buzzing with holiday frenzy just a week earlier are suddenly calm, littered with discarded wrapping paper and sagging wreaths. The world exhales. But in Denver, I knew the silence inside Daniel and Lily's house wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the walls are still dripping, the floor is still soaked, and no one wants to admit the damage. Their grand Christmas dinner had collapsed. 25 people, friends, co-workers, important connections had arrived expecting a feast. They got takeout cartons and awkward apologies instead. And me, I was in Dallas, padding across the soft carpet of my home, dressed in cozy pajamas, sipping coffee as the morning sun streamed through the window. The phone rang. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. I let it buzz 4 times before answering. Not out of cruelty, but out of choice. I wanted him to feel, for once, what it was like to wait on someone else's time. Hello, I said finally, my voice calm, even pleasant. There was a pause, and then a sigh. Mom. His tone was clipped, sharp, like he was holding his temper together by threads. Yes, Daniel. What the hell happened? I almost smiled. Straight to business. No greeting, no concern, nor are you okay? Just accusations. I don't know what you mean, I said softly. You left, he snapped. You knew we had guests coming. You knew what was expected of you, and you just vanished. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for us? There it was again. For us. Not for you, Mom, we were worried. Not for you, are you all right? Just their embarrassment, their image, their pride. I took a breath, steadying myself. This was the moment. The first crack in the dam. Daniel, I said evenly, I don't work for you. Silence. What? I don't work for you, I repeated, firmer this time. I am not your maid, your cook, your cleaner, or your background prop to make your life look better. I'm your mother. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that. On the other end of the line, I could hear him breathing heavily, like he'd just been punched. Then Lily's voice cut in. Oh, come on. Don't make this dramatic. You've always helped out. That's what family does. I clenched my jaw. Helping out is voluntary, Lily. What you two have done is treat me like free labor. You didn't ask, you assigned. And then you had the audacity to act like I should be grateful for the scraps of acknowledgement you threw me. That's not true, Daniel began, but I cut him off. Isn't it? Every time I came over, there was a pile of chores waiting for me. Every holiday I was the one up at dawn, cooking and cleaning, while you sat around entertaining guests. You never once asked me how I was doing. Not once. Tell me, Daniel, when was the last time you looked at me and saw your mother, instead of a pair of hands to make your life easier? Silence again. This time heavier. Lily huffed. This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You ruined Christmas, and honestly, you embarrassed us. People were asking questions. Do you know how that made us look? And that's when I laughed. Not a cruel laugh, just a tired, incredulous one. How it made you look? I said slowly. Lily, you've been worried about appearances since the day I met you. But here's the thing. Appearances crumble when the foundation is rotten. And what happened on Christmas? That was your foundation cracking, not mine. I could almost hear her teeth grinding through the phone. Daniel finally spoke, his voice lower now, less sure of itself. So what is this? Are you saying you're done? That you don't want to be part of our lives anymore? My heart twisted just a little. He was still my son. No matter how much he'd changed, no matter how blind he'd been, that fact would never leave me. But loving him didn't mean letting him walk all over me. I'm saying things are going to be different, I told him. From now on, I decide what I give. Not you. Not Lily. Me. But, no, Daniel. My voice hardened. This is not up for debate. You don't get to guilt me, manipulate me, or shame me into compliance anymore. If you want me in your life, it will be on respectful terms. If not, well, you already know I can build a life without you. Another pause. I pictured him sitting on the couch, his hand in his hair, Lily fuming beside him. You don't mean that, he said finally, but his voice cracked. He didn't believe his own words. I do, I said gently. And then, before either of them could protest, I added, besides, you'll find out soon enough. About my life. About the people in it. About the man you didn't even know existed. What are you talking about? Daniel asked sharply. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. You'll see. And then I ended the call. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. It wasn't just about refusing to cook a meal. It wasn't even about standing up to them. It was about reclaiming my identity, reminding myself, and them, that I was more than the role they had shoved me into. My husband walked into the room then, holding 2 mugs of tea. How did it go? I accepted the cup, savoring the warmth. They're rattled, I said, but they don't know the half of it yet. He chuckled. When they do, I almost feel sorry for them. Almost, I echoed, because the truth was, the confrontation wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Soon, Daniel and Lily's desperate desire to climb the social ladder would collide with the revelation that the very man they wanted to impress was already tied to me. And when that moment came, there would be no hiding, no excuses, no masks left to wear. The exposure would be absolute. The first week of January is always strange. The tinsel comes down, the lights dim, and people drag themselves back to work nursing both hangovers and resolutions they know they won't keep. But in Denver, Daniel and Lily were still reeling from the disaster that had been their Christmas. I knew because the calls hadn't stopped. They swung wildly between guilt-laced apologies and sharp accusations, depending on who was holding the phone. Daniel's messages sounded half confused, half pleading. Mom, can we talk? I don't understand why you're acting like this. Lily's, on the other hand, were venom wrapped in sugar. We love having you around, but you really need to think about how your actions affect others. Others. Always others. Never me. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I knew something they didn't. Something that would make answering their questions worth the wait. The annual New Year's Gala at the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas. My husband had been hosting it for over a decade. An event that drew business leaders, politicians, philanthropists, and anyone eager to rub elbows with power. Invitations were coveted, tickets impossible to buy, and appearances carefully calculated. And this year, Daniel and Lily had managed to snag an invite. Not because they deserved it, but because Lily had been schmoozing one of his junior executives for months, dropping hints about how they'd be the perfect couple to attend. The irony was exquisite. They had no idea that the man at the center of the ballroom, the one they wanted to impress more than anyone, was already mine. I hadn't told them. Not yet. Timing is everything in a good reveal, and this one needed to unfold in front of the right audience. When the night arrived, I dressed carefully. A navy silk gown that skimmed the floor, understated jewelry that still caught the light. My hair swept into a simple updo. I wasn't trying to outshine anyone, but I wanted to walk into that ballroom not as Daniel's mother, not as Lily's convenient housemaid, but as myself. My husband, ever the picture of authority, adjusted his tuxedo beside me. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ready," I said. The ballroom glittered when we entered. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables draped in white linen, silverware gleamed, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters moved gracefully between guests, balancing trays of champagne flutes. And there, near the center of the room, I spotted them. Daniel in a tailored suit that looked slightly too expensive for his comfort. Lily in a sequin dress that sparkled like she'd been dipped in glitter. Their smiles were wide, too wide, their laughter pitched just a little too high. They were working the room, shaking hands, dropping names, desperate to be noticed. I almost pitied them. Almost. As the evening wore on, the crowd gradually shifted toward the stage at the far end of the ballroom. It was time for the keynote address, the moment when my husband, as host, would step forward to speak. I slipped my hand into his as we walked toward the front, weaving through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers followed. Some knew me already, others didn't. But all eyes widened when they saw him. The man they'd come to hear, the man whose approval could open doors they'd been knocking on for years. He stepped onto the stage, the room quieting instantly. Authority radiated from him, not the kind you boast about, but the kind you can't fake. He spoke briefly about the challenges of the past year, about community and resilience, his voice steady and commanding. And then, with a subtle smile, he extended his hand toward me. "And before we begin tonight's celebration," he said, "I'd like to acknowledge the woman who stands beside me. My partner, my strength, and my wife." A murmur rippled through the crowd as I joined him on stage. Applause followed, polite at first, then swelling as people realized what he was saying. My husband, the CEO, the man they admired, was married quietly, without fanfare, to the woman standing right there. Me. And in the back of the room, I saw them. Daniel's face had gone pale, his mouth slightly open as if words had been stolen from him. Lily's hand gripped his arm so tightly her knuckles turned white, her carefully painted smile frozen in place. They hadn't known. They hadn't even suspected. The man they had been desperate to impress, the man they had schemed and maneuvered just to stand near, was already tied to the very woman they had dismissed as an outdated nuisance in their home. My husband squeezed my hand as the applause continued. I kept my chin high, my expression calm, but inside, I was savoring every second. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was reclamation. When the speech ended and we stepped down from the stage, guests swarmed us with congratulations, handshakes, and kind words. I smiled graciously, answered their questions, and stood tall. Not Daniel's mother, not Lily's housemaid, but a woman in her own right. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel and Lily pushing through the crowd, their expressions a mixture of shock and desperation. "Mom," Daniel hissed when they finally reached me, his voice low but frantic. "What is going on?" I turned to face him, my expression serene. "What does it look like? You're married?" To him, his eyes flicked toward my husband, disbelief written across his face. Yes, I said simply. Lily's lips twitched as she tried to paste on a smile. Why didn't you tell us? I tilted my head. Why would I? You never asked. The sting in those words hung in the air. Daniel flinched, just slightly. Lily opened her mouth to retort, but no sound came out. Because in that moment, surrounded by the very people they had hoped to impress, they realized the truth. The power dynamic had shifted. They could no longer look down on me, dismiss me, or assign me chores like I was staff. Not when every person in that ballroom now saw me as something they never expected. The wife of the man they idolized. And judging by the whispers that spread through the crowd, that truth was traveling fast. The gala carried on as if nothing seismic had happened. The quartet struck up a lively tune. Champagne flutes clinked, and laughter spilled across the ballroom like golden light. But for Daniel and Lily, the glitter had dulled. Their smiles were stretched thin, their eyes darting nervously toward me and my husband, as if the truth might somehow be contained if they stared hard enough. They didn't approach me again right away. No, Lily was too calculating for that. She dragged Daniel into whispered huddles with other guests. Her laugh just a little too shrill, her gestures a little too wide. I knew that move well. When she was cornered, she doubled down on appearances. She wasn't going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. But behind her eyes, I saw the storm brewing. By the time the night wound down and the last champagne had been poured, they could no longer avoid me. They cornered me in the hallway outside the grand ballroom, where the muffled sounds of music and chatter still echoed faintly. The plush carpet swallowed our footsteps, the chandeliers above casting golden shadows across their pale, tight faces. Mom, Daniel started, his voice strained. Can we talk? Privately. I crossed my arms loosely, my silk gown flowing around me. For years I'd felt small in front of him and Lily, reduced to chores and silence. But here, in the quiet glow of the Ritz-Carlton, I felt taller than I ever had. Of course, I said. My husband gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before slipping back into the ballroom, leaving me alone with them. The door clicked shut, and the hallway was ours. Daniel raked a hand through his hair, the way he used to when he was a teenager caught in a lie. Why didn't you tell me? He asked finally. Why didn't you say you were married? To who? Lily added sharply, her voice cutting like glass. To him of all people? Do you have any idea how? How what? I interrupted, my tone calm but firm. Her lips pressed together. She wasn't used to me cutting her off. Daniel stepped forward, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might gossip. We didn't expect this. You've been keeping secrets. From your own son. I tilted my head. Funny. You never asked. Not once. Every time I visited, it was about your house, your chores, your parties. When did you ever sit down with me and ask how I was doing? What my life looked like? Who I spent time with? Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. No answer. Lily let out a sharp laugh, brittle as icicles. You're making this sound like we're villains. All we ever did was let you be part of our lives. We gave you a place. The venom in her words only made me smile. You gave me a place? Lily, you gave me chores, lists, expectations. You gave me the role of a servant in your home and dressed it up as inclusion. That isn't family. That's convenience. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. His face was flushed, whether from shame or anger I couldn't tell. You embarrassed us, Lily snapped, her mask slipping for just a moment. In front of everyone on Christmas, and now tonight? Do you know how people will talk? I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a steady whisper. Yes, Lily, people will talk. And do you know what they'll say? They'll say that the woman you treated like a maid was, in fact, the wife of the very man you wanted to impress. They'll say you underestimated her. And they'll be right. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Daniel's eyes flicked between us, torn between defending his wife and absorbing the truth. So, what happens now? He asked finally, his voice quieter. Where do we go from here? The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't expect it, but because it showed a sliver of vulnerability I hadn't seen in him for years. For a moment, I saw my son again, Not the man who let his wife use me as free labor, but the boy who once clung to my hand crossing streets, who once cried into my shoulder after scraped knees and broken hearts. But sympathy is a dangerous thing. It clouds judgment. I straighten my shoulders. That depends on you, Daniel. On both of you. I'm not here to be your servant. Not anymore. If you want me in your lives, it will be as your mother, not your maid. If that's too much for you, then perhaps some distance will do us all good. Daniel swallowed hard. His jaw flexed as if he were fighting the urge to argue, but no words came. Lily, however, couldn't leave it there. So what? You think you're better than us now, she spat. Because you married into money? Because people clap when your husband talks. I met her glare steadily. No, Lily, I don't think I'm better than you. But I know I deserve better treatment than what I got from you. And now you know it too. Her face flushed red, but she said nothing. The hallway stretched silent between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. At last, Daniel sighed, his shoulders slumping. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Then don't say anything, I told him. Show me. If you want this relationship to survive, show me through your actions. Respect me. Ask about my life. Treat me like more than a chore list with a pulse. That's all I've ever wanted. For the first time that night, Daniel's eyes softened. He gave a small nod, tentative but real. Lily turned away, arms crossed tight, her silence louder than any insult. I didn't expect them to change overnight. People rarely do. But for once, the balance had shifted. I wasn't the one begging for a place at their table. They were the ones scrambling to figure out how to keep a place at mine. When I rejoined my husband in the ballroom, his hand slipped into mine effortlessly. All good, he asked. Not resolved, I admitted, but good enough, because the truth was, closure doesn't always come in one dramatic moment. Sometimes it comes in setting a boundary and watching it hold. And that night, as music swelled around us and the city lights glittered beyond the tall windows, I felt more closed, more whole than I had in years. The days after the gala felt like stepping into a new season of my life. Dallas was cool and crisp in January, the air tinged with the faint smell of cedar and the hum of traffic along the highways. My husband and I returned to our quiet home, tucked away from the noise, where mornings began with coffee on the porch and evenings ended with laughter over dinner. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself for the next demand from Daniel and Lily. I wasn't waiting for the phone to buzz with a grocery list or a casual command disguised as a favor. I was just living. But then, slowly, the messages began. The first was short, almost hesitant. Daniel, hey Mom. Hope you got home safe. I stared at it for a while before answering. Me, yes. Thank you. No more, no less. The conversation ended there, but it was the first text from him in years that hadn't included an assignment. No requests. No hidden agenda. Just words. A week later came another. Daniel, remember that diner in Boulder we used to go to? The one with the pancakes bigger than the plates? The memory bloomed instantly in my mind. Daniel at 12 years old, syrup dripping down his chin as he grinned at me across the booth. My chest ached with nostalgia. Me, I remember. Why? His reply took longer this time, as though he was weighing the risk of vulnerability. Daniel, thought maybe we could go again. Just us. When I told my husband about it later that night, he nodded thoughtfully. He's reaching out, he said, testing the waters. And so, a week later, I found myself sliding into a booth at Dot's Diner in Boulder. The place hadn't changed much. The same red vinyl seats, the same smell of coffee and bacon grease, the same waitress who somehow recognized me after all these years. Daniel arrived a few minutes late, looking sheepish in his wool coat. For the first time in a long time, he looked less like a polished adult and more like the boy I used to know. We ordered pancakes, just like old times. The conversation was awkward at first, save topics like the weather, his work, a new hiking trail he wanted to try near Estes Park. But then, between bites of syrup-soaked pancakes, he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Mom." I set my fork down, giving him my full attention. For what? I asked, though I knew. For everything, he said, his voice thick. For letting Lily treat you the way she did. For standing by and not saying anything. for forgetting that you're my mom before anything else. The diner noise carried on around us, clinking dishes, laughter from a nearby table, the hiss of the griddle. But in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. I should have protected you, Daniel continued, or at least stood up for you. Instead, I let it happen because it was easier than fighting with her. There it was, the admission I had been waiting years to hear. I know I can't undo it, he added, but I want to do better. I want to make it right. I studied his face, the earnestness in his eyes, the way his hands twisted the napkin until it nearly tore. He wasn't just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. He meant it. I believe you, I said finally, but words are only the first step. It'll take time. I know, he whispered. I'll wait as long as it takes. When the pancakes arrived, we both laughed at the absurd size of them, just like we used to. For the first time in years, I felt hope flicker in my chest where bitterness had once lived. But of course, redemption is never simple. Because while Daniel was taking small steps toward healing, Lily was digging her heels in deeper. I saw it in the messages she left me, sharp, passive-aggressive little notes that pretended to be concern. Lily, I just think it's strange you didn't tell us about the wedding. Transparency is important in families, don't you agree? Or, Lily, we're trying to plan the next holiday. Will you be available, or are you too busy again? The quotes around too busy stung, not because of the insult itself, but because it revealed her fear that I was slipping out of her control. And she was right. When I didn't respond, she tried other tactics. Inviting me to events she thought I couldn't refuse, like Daniel's office mixers or brunches with mutual acquaintances. Each invitation was framed as if she were doing me a favor. But I had learned something valuable since Christmas. I wasn't obligated. Not anymore. I declined most of them politely, sometimes citing prior commitments, sometimes saying simply, no, thank you. And each time, I imagined the crack forming a little deeper in Lily's carefully curated mask. Daniel, for his part, noticed. One evening he called me, his voice low, as if he were speaking from another room. She's upset, he admitted. She thinks you're trying to embarrass her. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. He sighed. I know. I'm trying to explain that to her, but she doesn't, he trailed off. She doesn't like change. None of us do, I said gently. But change is necessary if we want things to be better. There was a pause. Then, thank you for meeting me at the diner. It meant a lot. As I hung up, I realized something. Redemption doesn't always look like grand apologies or sweeping gestures. Sometimes it looks like pancakes in Boulder. Sometimes it looks like a son trying, fumbling, but still trying. And sometimes it looks like holding the line against someone. Life doesn't hand you neat endings. That's something I've learned in 60 years of living, and the past few months only confirmed it. I used to think resolution meant a final bow, the curtain falling, the applause fading, and everyone exiting stage left with smiles on their faces. But reality is softer, Messier. Resolution is waking up one morning and realizing the ache in your chest has dulled. It's noticing that you laugh more often than you cry. It's recognizing that the people who once defined your worth no longer have that power. That realization came slowly for me. After the gala, after the hallway confrontation, after the pancakes in Boulder, my days fell into a new rhythm. In Dallas, my husband and I built a life that was ours alone. He had his boardrooms and speeches. I had my writing circles and volunteer work. Together, we had quiet evenings, road trips to places like Fredericksburg or Santa Fe, long drives with no agenda except watching the landscape shift from flat plains to rolling hills. It wasn't glamorous to anyone else, but to me, it was everything. And still, in the background, there was Daniel. He didn't change overnight. No one does, but I noticed the small efforts. He called more often, sometimes just to say hello. He asked questions about my life, real ones, not the shallow kind designed to fill space. When I told him about the book club I'd joined in Highland Park, he remembered enough to ask what we were reading a week later. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Lily was another story. Her pride was a fortress, and she guarded it fiercely. When I declined her brunch invitations, she pouted to Daniel. When I chose not to attend their 4th of July party, she sent me passive-aggressive texts about family unity. It was always about optics with her, how things looked to others, never how they felt within. At first, I bristled at her messages, the old habit of guilt tugging at me. But then I realized something. Her words only had as much power as I gave them. And so, I stopped giving them any. That was my real resolution, not a dramatic mic drop, not a final showdown, but a quiet, steady reclaiming of my peace. One evening in late summer, Daniel and I met again, this time at a cafe near Union Station in Denver. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, the trains humming in the distance. We sat outside with iced tea, the air warm but not suffocating. He told me about a new project at work, how stressful it was, how he wished he had more time for hiking. Then, almost hesitantly, he said, "I know things with Lily are complicated, but I want you to know that I see you, Mom. I really do." For the first time in years, I believed him. I reached across the table, resting my hand over his. "That's all I've ever wanted, Daniel. To be seen." He nodded, eyes glistening. We didn't solve everything that evening, but we didn't need to. Life isn't about perfect solutions. It's about progress, about moving a little closer to each other one conversation at a time. As for Lily, I decided something important. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need her approval or her permission to exist in my son's life. If she wanted to remain in her fortress of pride, that was her choice. I couldn't tear it down for her, but I could choose not to be trapped inside it. And so, I built my own home, in the truest sense of the word. Not just the house in Dallas with its wide windows and quiet porch, but the home within myself, a place where dignity, peace, and joy resided. That's what resolution looks like. It's Daniel calling to ask about my week instead of sending me a to-do list. It's laughing with my husband over burnt cookies we pretended were gourmet. It's standing tall at family gatherings, unashamed of the boundaries I've drawn. It's finally, after all these years, knowing my worth. Because here's the truth. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you. And in that quiet defiance, you win. Looking back now, I don't regret the empty kitchen on Christmas, or the stunned faces at the gala, or even the long, painful years that led me there. Every moment carved me into who I am today, a woman who will never again mistake servitude for love. And if anyone reading this has ever felt invisible in their own family, let me tell you, you are not. You matter. You are worthy. And you deserve a seat at the table, not because of what you can do for others, but because of who you are. That is the real resolution. The thing about endings is that they always carry beginnings hidden inside them. When I closed the door on my role as maid in Daniel and Lily's home, I didn't realize I was opening a new door to freedom, to dignity, and to a kind of peace I hadn't tasted in decades. And yet, life has a way of circling back, of testing those boundaries to make sure they're not just walls built in anger, but foundations strong enough to stand. That test came the following Thanksgiving. For years, Thanksgiving had been my responsibility. I cooked the turkey, baked the pies, set the table with the good china, polished the silver. Even when Daniel was grown and Lily came into the picture, the tradition carried on, though slowly the responsibility shifted. By the time they were married, the expectation wasn't spoken, it was demanded. "Mom, you'll handle the meal, right?" Daniel would say, and Lily with her saccharine smile would add, "You always do it so much better than anyone else." We wouldn't dream of trying, which, of course, was code for we won't lift a finger. You'll do it all, and we'll take the credit. But this Thanksgiving was different. Weeks before the holiday, Daniel called me. His voice was hesitant, careful. "Mom," he said, "we'd love it if you and your husband could join us this year. For dinner. Not to make dinner. Not to serve dinner. To join." I almost didn't believe him. "You mean as guests?" "Yes," he said quickly. "As guests. Lily and I will handle the cooking." I could almost hear the strain in his voice, as though he'd rehearsed the line a dozen times. But I also heard something else, sincerity. And so, on Thanksgiving afternoon, my husband and I drove up to Denver. The air was crisp, snow dusting the tips of the Rockies in the distance, the sky a bright, impossible blue. I held my breath as we pulled into their driveway, unsure of what we'd find. The door opened before we could knock. Daniel stood there in an apron dusted with flour, his hair slightly mussed, his cheeks flushed from the heat of the kitchen. "Hey, Mom," he said, smiling sheepishly. "Happy Thanksgiving." I stepped inside and the smell hit me first. Turkey roasting in the oven, sweet potatoes spiced with cinnamon, apple pie cooling on the counter. Lily was at the stove, stirring gravy in a saucepan. Her sequin dresses and polished masks were gone. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she turned to face me, her smile was smaller than usual, but realer somehow. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. I blinked, surprised. It wasn't perfect. The counters were messy, dishes piled in the sink. Daniel's attempt at bread rolls looked more like dense little rocks than fluffy clouds, but it was theirs. For the first time, it was theirs. We sat down at the table together. Me, my husband, Daniel, and Lily. The food wasn't flawless, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that no one handed me a dish towel. No one slid a grocery list my way. I wasn't expected to serve. I wasn't expected to perform. I was expected to eat, to talk, to laugh, to belong. Halfway through the meal, Daniel raised his glass. His voice wavered just slightly as he said, "I want to say thank you to Mom for always being there, even when I didn't deserve it, for teaching me what family really means. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm grateful I get another chance to do better." I felt the sting of tears in my eyes as glasses clinked softly around the table. And then, something I never expected. Lily spoke. She set down her fork, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I haven't been fair to you," she admitted, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I thought having you do things for us was just part of family life. But really, it was selfish. And I'm sorry." The room held its breath. Apologies had never come easily from Lily, not in all the years I'd known her. But there it was, fragile and raw, like a sapling breaking through hard ground. I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Lily. That means more than you know." Was it perfect? No. Did it erase years of resentment? Of course not. But it was a start. And sometimes a start is all you need. We lingered at the table long after the plates were empty, the conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. My husband told stories from his younger days in Houston. Daniel laughed until tears rolled down his face, and even Lily relaxed, smiling genuinely instead of posing for an audience that wasn't there. When the evening ended and we said our goodbyes, Daniel hugged me tightly, longer than usual. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too," I said, my voice thick. Driving back to Dallas that night, I realized something profound. For years, I had fought for a seat at their table, believing that love meant service, that family meant sacrifice until there was nothing left of me. But the truth was simpler. I didn't need to fight for a seat at their table. I had built my own. And when I sat at theirs now, it was not as a servant, not as an afterthought, but as myself. A woman, a mother, a wife, whole and unshaken. Resolution isn't about tying everything into a neat bow. It's about finding peace in the messy, imperfect middle. It's about accepting small steps, small apologies, small moments of laughter, and letting them weave together into something bigger. That Thanksgiving, surrounded by mismatched rolls and lumpy gravy, I found something I hadn't expected to find again with Daniel and Lily. I found family, not the version they once forced me into. Not the version where love was conditional on what I could provide, but the real version, the kind where I was seen, respected, and valued. And that more than any grand revenge or dramatic reveal was the true victory, because I finally had a seat at my own table. The older I get, the more I understand that stories aren't just things we tell for entertainment. They're survival guides. They're lanterns on dark roads. Reminders that someone else has walked this path before and made it through. For years, my story was one I never would have chosen to share. Who wants to admit they let their own child and his wife treat them like furniture? Who wants to say out loud that they scrubbed dishes while being treated like a burden, that they mistook crumbs of inclusion for love? But silence only ever helped the wrong people. So I began to speak. At first, it was small. in my book club back in Highland Park, sipping tea in the corner of someone's living room, I let a little piece slip. My daughter-in-law once left me a grocery list on the counter as if I were her maid. I said with a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. The room went still. And then the story spilled out, not from me, but from the other women. One had in-laws who never said, "Thank you." Another had grown children who only called when they needed money. Someone else whispered about being excluded from family vacations, only to be asked later to help with the kids once they returned. It was like a dam breaking. I realized then that I wasn't alone. That so many of us, especially women of a certain age, had been taught to make ourselves small, to accept disrespect under the disguise of love. So I kept talking. I shared my story at church luncheons in Dallas, at community centers in Houston, even once at a retirement community in Austin when a friend invited me to speak. Each time, the same thing happened. Silence, followed by tears, followed by voices that had been waiting years to be heard. And each time, I felt a little lighter. Daniel noticed, too. On one of our regular phone calls, he said, "I heard you spoke at some event last week. Mom, that's incredible." I smiled. It feels good to turn something painful into something useful. There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words carried more weight than I can explain. For so long, I had lived for scraps of validation from him and Lily. Now, I didn't need it to survive, but hearing it was still a gift. Even Lily surprised me once. It was months after that Thanksgiving dinner at a summer barbecue in Denver. She pulled me aside, away from the crowd, her expression uncharacteristically earnest. "I've been reading some of the things you've written," she said, her hands twisting nervously. "About boundaries, about dignity." She took a breath. I think I needed to hear them. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. And for Lily, that was monumental. I realized then that my story had done something revenge never could. It had planted seeds. Seeds of awareness, of change, of possibility. The greatest revenge, after all, isn't just living well. It's helping others learn to do the same. One autumn evening, my husband and I hosted dinner at our house in Dallas. The table was set simply: candles, homemade bread, roasted vegetables from the farmer's market. Daniel and Lily sat across from us, laughter flowing more easily than it once did. At the end of the meal, my husband raised his glass. "To family," he said. But this time, the word meant something different. It wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about roles assigned and performed. It was about choice, respect, mutual care. I lifted my glass, meeting Daniel's eyes. He smiled at me, no tension, no guilt, just love. And I knew then that the circle was complete. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. Because here's the truth I wish I had known sooner. The truth I now tell anyone who will listen. Family isn't who you serve. Family is who sees you. Family isn't built on chores or silence or endurance. It's built on love that recognizes your worth, even when you're not useful. And if someone refuses to see you, you have the right, the responsibility, to step back and build a table of your own. That's what I did. And against all odds, when I stopped fighting for scraps at their table, Daniel found his way back to mine. That's the miracle of it. As I sit here now, writing these words from my porch in Dallas, the sun setting golden over the horizon, I feel a peace I never thought I'd know again. The cicadas hum in the trees, my husband hums softly in the kitchen, and my phone buzzes with a message from Daniel. "Daniel, love you, Mom. Talk soon." This time, there's no list attached. No expectation, just love. And that, at long last, is enough.